Welcome in, welcome in. Saturday night means it's time for DFS Chalk Talk, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy, and we get it going right after this. Yes, indeed. It's time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. We are a duo tonight. We're down our buddy Mike. He's in the process of moving, a new job, and a lot of action going on over there. But as always, I got my man Joe. What's happening, brother?
I'll tell you what. I mean, we're not even on the air without Mikey. So let's just get that out of the way real quick. That being said, we got a little old school 2 tickets to fantasy reunion show here tonight for week 8 DFS. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it ain't easy. I mean, filling in for Mike, it's almost like pinch hitting for Barry Bonds. It's tough to do, my man, but you know we'll try to get it done. Before we came on, we were discussing just beforehand, a little bit earlier, Matthew Perry, unfortunately, has passed away tonight at the age of 54. If you're the age of Joe and myself, we grew up with this guy on Friends and otherwise. I mean, he made a guest appearance on 90210, I believe, in one episode. Unfortunately, it's tough to hear. It's just a shame, Joe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think my wife's like literally crying upstairs. The only weird thing about it, and it's not a joke, but I just reading real quick. TMC said he died at a friend's house. He drowned in their jacuzzi, and I just first of all, if anybody's ever seen me swim, I can make no swimming jokes whatsoever. So I will not do so. The only thing I'm wondering, and I'm not a big hot tub guy, so I haven't had that many hot tub experiences, but here's my quick thought process on this before we get to DFS. You're at a friend's house in a jacuzzi. That must mean you must have a woman with you. There must be other women and men. I'm not going into the jacuzzi with just you, Jeff. I've known you since I started walking. I ain't going into a hot tub with you. So there's other people there. There's got to be a woman who somewhat cares about him a little bit there. How the fuck do you let somebody drown in a jacuzzi?
Great question, man. The only thing...
No drugs. They said no drugs at the scene.
Oh, that's even that. Then there's no excuse. And I was just gonna say the only thing you're worse at than swimming is driving, which is why I do all the driving when I'm home. So in any case, so we do all things DFS here on Saturday nights. What we typically start off with is who we are paying up for this week from the matchups coming up on the main slate. Joe, who do you got that you're paying up for?
Yeah, so this week, I got a few in there because, and we'll go over injuries tomorrow, I know, but with some of the injuries going on with some of the running backs and the wideouts that are out, Deebo Samuel, Justin Jefferson, a couple of the running backs too, I've got some real cheap plays in, which has allowed me to kind of go high-low on DraftKings this week. So I'm paying up for Lamar Jackson, 8,100. Lamar Jackson's career in year annually is such a roller coaster from a fantasy perspective. But the guy
seems like you froze up for a second.
I think you froze up for a second.
Sorry. One of us froze up for a second there, Joe. Continue. Go ahead.
Lamar went for 38 last week. And despite having 2 teen weeks prior to that, he went for 29, 32, and 22. So, I was talking to some buddies how there aren't nearly as many quarterbacks as you would think who are averaging over 20, 22, 23 a game this year. Lamar has actually kind of made himself be one of the most consistent fantasy QBs through 7 weeks. So I'm paying up 8,100 for him. I'm paying for Christian McCaffrey. The guy wasn't even healthy last week, and he went for 23. Now they're home against Cincinnati. I have no reason to think he won't go for another 20 plus. 9,200, but I'm paying it. And then the other main pay up for me, like I said, I got 3 legit ones in my lineup this week, and this guy's not being talked about, what he's doing right now. A.J. Brown for Philadelphia. His last 5 DraftKings weeks are 32, 23, 21, 41, and 25. The guy is on freaking fire. He went for 10, 137 and a touchdown last week. They're at Washington, which that will probably end up being a closer game than it should be, but it's hard to turn your attention away from A.J. Brown, given the fact that he's putting the same type of production up right now as Hill, Cup, Chase, all those guys. He's a little bit cheaper. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, well, actually, since you brought up Lamar, I'm going to go to Mike's lineup of who he's paying up for first, because he's sharing a brain with you as far as Lamar is concerned. He's 8,800 at Arizona on FanDuel. And it's been interesting because, to me, Lamar hasn't – it's been a little quiet almost that he's had these types of numbers. It's not like it's somebody who's completely top of mind, but you're right. He's had a great start to the year, and almost, to me, for him, a little quietly. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 13 total touchdowns, 8 passing, and 5 rushing. I think, I have him in the CTN in our league too, and I feel like the passing's been a struggle other than last week. He went for 357 and 3 touchdowns last week. Prior to that, the passing's been the struggle, as it always is with him. But he's been getting, 5 rushing touchdowns through 7 weeks, so that'll get you there.
You can't deny it. And the other guy, Mike, is paying up for, and you disagree with him a little bit on this. I kind of agree with him. He's got Puka Nacua. He's at Dallas, 8,000 on FanDuel. The reason I agree with Mike on this one is because if you look at Nacua and you look at Cooper Kupp, Kupp is $1,100 more. He's 9,100 on FanDuel. And if you look at since Kupp came back, Kupp has had 28 targets in the 3 games. Nacua's had 30 targets. And he's just out targeting him, seems to be out receiving him, maybe not necessarily yard wise. I didn't look at it completely, but I don't disagree with the pay up on Nacua. I know you have a little bit of a gripe with it.
Well, yeah. And I'm not big on rookies anyway. So I'll be the first person to say it took me a couple extra weeks to get on the Nacua train, while he started so hot. And I know Kupp only had 2 catches last week for 29 yards, which was a complete outlier. His 2 games prior to that were 15 catches for $168, $166, and a touchdown. My issue with Nacua is Kupp's not going to stop getting his targets, and especially after a bad week last week. I think Kupp's going to come back strong this week. They lost to the Steelers and couldn't score, and now they lost their running back, who was actually playing very well, one of the surprise running backs of the year so far this year, in Kyron Williams. They've now lost him to IR.
No.
So
yeah.
I'm just now they're at Dallas. And I'm having a hard time believing that they're going to be able to put the points up that we're going to need to pay $8,000 for either of their wideouts, to be completely honest right now.
Well, I'll agree with Mike in this one aspect that he's 1,100 less than Kupp. So if you're going to choose one, I suppose you can put that 1,100 towards something else, I guess.
I agree with you there. If I had to play one of those guys this week, I would save the money and go Nacua based on the fact that he's gotten a couple more targets since Kupp's been back. But their offense is worrying me now. They've gone like hot, cold this year. And at Dallas, I'm not a big fan of that matchup for them this week.
Well, which should be interesting when we get to my bargains. In any case, we'll go with my pay-ups, though. So first, I'm going to start with Jamar Chase. Just the fact that he's Jamar Chase. I don't care. He's at San Francisco. He's 8,500 on FanDuel. Over the last 4 weeks, he's had 56 targets. Again, I don't. This guy is just on fire. Burrow has not been Burrow, and we haven't seen that Cincinnati offense really click yet. But Jamar Chase is just flat out the guy there. I can't see him not paying off this week. I don't know what you think about that one, but it's just one of my guys I'm paying up for.
I can't argue with Jamar Chase. He on DraftKings, he's 100 more than AJ Brown, and I was at salary. I think I'm not overly comfortable with the at San Fran matchup, but I mean, that's what'd you just say? 16 targets averaging or 14 targets a game. His last 4
weeks, so I'm not doing the math. It's 56 targets over the last 4 games.
That's 14 a week exactly. You can't argue with that. That's a really interesting game this week. San Francisco coming off the bad loss. Cincinnati still trying to repair the beginning of their season. That's all of a sudden kind of a big game for those 2 teams.
It certainly should be interesting. The other guy, I don't know if I would necessarily call this a pay up or whether you kind of find it in the middle of pay up and a bargain, but I'm looking at Jonathan Taylor. He's 7,100 at home versus New Orleans. Now, the touches since he's come back have gone from 7 to 13 to 21. And I have to think now, the Colts have paid him 3 years, $42 million. Do you honestly think they want to feed Zach Moss when paying a guy like this? I think Taylor is going to be hitting it hard this week. I have to think he's going to be well over 20 touches again, and he might be a running back 1 or 2 straight up coming out of this week. So I don't know what you think about that one, Joe.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, they're ramping him up. He did look better. He looked good for the first time last week. Zach Moss has been phenomenal, but more of a point than any of it this week. Moss hasn't practiced. I mean, he practiced a little on Thursday, but he didn't practice Wednesday or Friday. He's got some sort of elbow heel issue. He's very questionable. So Jonathan Taylor could be looking like a really, really good play by 11 a.m. Sunday morning if Moss doesn't.
Yeah, and I've got him in a few of my lineups, and we'll get into the full lineup thing
real quick because I had the same one, and I think he's worth mentioning the same way that Jonathan Taylor is. 6,100 on DraftKings this week, Isaiah Pacheco, and first of all, you want to talk about the pillar of consistency. His last 5 DraftKings weeks: 16, 28, 13, 16, 16. So you pretty much know what you're going to get. They're playing Denver. And we're going to get our first snow game of the NFL season. It's projected to snow quite a bit. So I'm really loving Pacheco this week.
And I think that Mike's actually really loving that game too. Of course, he's biased because he is a Broncos fan, which leads us into the bargain place for a week. Mike's got Javon.
Yeah. Hold on a second. We got a question.
Who we got?
The producers are telling us Burrow or Stroud, and Carr or Russ. So I'm going to go.
I'll let you answer first, and I'll go ahead, my friend. Or I can just go.
You are the host, and I took that. No, I'm just going to say the 49ers run defense is pretty legit. I don't expect the Bengals to be able to run. So even if the Bengals don't have a great game, Burrow's going to drop back a lot. It's probably going to lead to some trash yardage in the fourth quarter if it's not a close game. If it is a close game, he's going to throw a lot. So I definitely like Burrow there. As far as Carr or Russ goes, well, if weather wasn't an issue, I would go Russ because Denver's going to have to throw it all day. With the weather being the way that it is, I don't know. What do you think on that? I'm not even going to answer that one, Mish. What do you think on that one?
I honestly think because of that, it was on the edge roughly, but because the weather is going to be the way it is, I would say Derek Carr. He's at Indianapolis. I mean, Carr hasn't been terrible. He hasn't been phenomenal, but neither has Russell Wilson. So I think,
and I will say, Carr's got 20 DraftKings points the last 2 weeks, which I didn't realize when I went to look that up.
I mean, given that, I'd go Carr, Burrow, or Stroud. That's an interesting one. Stroud's been, I tell you, so they're at Carolina, not exactly the greatest defense in the world. You have to think the offense is going to be out there a little bit. They have had some weapons there with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Although I made a case for Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, and I still think I'm gonna lean Burrow on this one. Stroud is not a terrible play, but I'll lean Burrow.
I agree. He's not a terrible play, and Stroud was hot. Like, he didn't have a great first week against Baltimore, real quick, and then he went for 25, 20, and 25. Indy, Jacksonville, and Pittsburgh. But now the last 2 weeks, Atlanta, New Orleans, only 14 and 15. So I just feel like Burrow has the better shot of getting you to 20, which for me in my head, that's kind of how I evaluate where I'm going quarterback wise. Which one of these guys has the best shot of getting me 20? I feel like Burrow. It's close though. It is. Stroud against Carolina. It's a nice matchup.
I'm actually going to say Burrow just simply because of Jamar Chase on that one. That kind of, to me, that puts him over the top. So
I mean, if Chase goes for 10, $150 and a touchdown, Burrow only needs like another 75 yards and one more touchdown to have a decent day.
Exactly. So from a bargain standpoint, like we were discussing earlier, Mikey, because of that snow game, he's got Javonte Williams. He's picked Javonte Williams a lot. He's a Denver guy. This is his thing. Javonte Williams is bound to pop off one of these weeks. You might have to think it's in the snow versus Kansas City and the 6,000 on FanDuel. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's going to get the touches. You can't really argue with that. It's just a matter of, is he ever going to get in the end zone is really what we're asking.
Well, I guess we'll find out. The other one that, and then I have a gripe with this one a little bit. He's going George Kittle bargain wise, 6,100 at home versus Cincinnati. Now, I like Kittle a lot. I obviously he had that huge game. He had, I mean, oddly enough, it was 3 receptions for 67 yards and 3 touchdowns. But so here are his last 5 games. He had 7 receptions for 90 yards, 1 reception for 9 yards. Then you had the 3 for 67 with the 3 touchdowns, 1 reception for 1 yard, and 5 receptions for 78 yards. I'm leaning Kittle has more of a 1 reception for 8 yards coming up than I think he would have for another 3 touchdowns. That's just my opinion.
So I'm looking at the same thing, and I would have said the exact same thing. And his first 2 games were 5 points and 6 points, so not great. However, he bounced back 13, 5 for 78 last week. And the thing about it is now there's no Debo. So, right, he has moved up 1 spot, and Ayuk is legit now. McCaffrey, is getting all 25, 30 of his touches. But Kittle's pretty much he's moved up a spot. So he's option 3 instead of option 4. So I would, if I'm going to play Kittle, it's going to be while Debo's out.
I don't necessarily feel the greatest about this.
Just in case it was announced only like an hour or 2 ago, actually, that Purdy is going to play tomorrow, Monday night.
Gotcha. And we'll have more updates tomorrow morning on the Blitz at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So since we're talking bargains, I got one bargain this week. We discussed him. You brought him up a little bit earlier. I got Darrell Henderson Jr. at Dallas. He's 5,900 on FanDuel. He had 19 touches last week with a touchdown. We've seen Darrell Henderson be you mentioned the Kyron Williams injury. He's done very well. We've seen Darrell Henderson be the guy a couple of years ago. I still think he can be the guy, and he has that in him. The Rams offense has that in him. So I think 5,900 is a real steal to get this guy maybe at a flex position or something, just to get somebody big into your lineup.
Well, the thing there is trust. I mean, clearly they proved last week that and Darrell Henderson, he was the starter in their Super Bowl championship season, wasn't he? Yeah.
I believe.
So despite being on the practice squad all year and Cam Akers jumping them last year, then getting traded, and then Kyron Williams now, they have gravitated back to Henderson if you're going to play one of those guys, which I'm not I don't love any of them against Dallas. Again, it's not a great matchup, but Henderson's going to get double-digit touches. So, yeah, for the price, it's worth it.
Bargain-wise, who you got?
So wide receiver, got a couple. Jawan Jennings going back to that San Francisco. No Debo Samuel. Jawan went for 5 for 54 last week at Minnesota. He's 3,800 on DraftKings, so another 5 for 50, 10-point game. I'd be okay there. And then even cheaper at wideout, 3,200. Brandon Powell for the Vikings at Green Bay this week. Obviously, no Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison had his coming out party last week, so Green Bay is now going to treat him like a number 1. Powell went for 4 for 64 last week. That was against San Fran. Now they're at Green Bay, assuming it's not going to snow, although if it's going to snow in Denver, maybe we got to look at the weather tomorrow in Green Bay too. I don't know. But Powell's the number 2 there. They got to throw a lot. They're not stopping anybody. I like Powell for some trash points. And then I'll steal your thunder. I'm surprised you didn't mention him. Or did you? Was I not listening? Did you mention Trey McBride?
I did not. He's in my lineup, but I did not mention him. Go ahead.
2,800, Trey McBride, tight end, Arizona. Zach Ertz is now out on IR. I mean, if you paid any attention to Arizona, which really, unless you're a nerd like we are from a fantasy perspective, not much reason to, although they've played much harder and have played much closer games than anybody would have expected given that roster. But they were Dobbs has been throwing to Ertz a ton. So, McBride's got 7 catches the last 2 weeks for 7 catches, 91 yards the last 2 weeks, 2,800. 4 for 40, 4 for 35, PPR is a point on DraftKings. You get what you need from him at 2,800.
No doubt. And actually I have him in my lineup, which leads us into, and I'll start with Mikey's lineup, who he's going with DFS wise. So we'll go ahead. He's got QB. He's got Lamar at Arizona, 8,800. We already discussed Lamar. I think that's a great play. Should be interesting to see what he does against Arizona. Running back Javonte Williams, talked about him, 6,000 at home versus Kansas City. He's also got Damian Pierce at Carolina, 6,700. I don't think that's a terrible play. Carolina, their offense can't stay on the field. Houston's going to put up some points. I can imagine. I can envision Damian Pierce maybe getting in the end zone one time. So wide receiver, he's got Kendrick Bourne at Miami, 6,200. I don't think that's a terrible play either because Miami's defense has not been stellar. Obviously, they put up a ton of points, but they've got points scored against them. So I think Kendrick Bourne, who's kind of set himself apart to be that number one, seemingly. So we'll see what happens there. I don't mind that play.
In a large pile of shit in New England for targets, Bourne has reared his head as the best smelling piece of shit on that team.
And as a New England fan, I'll move on from that comment. So next we got Terry McLaurin at home versus Philadelphia, 7,000. I don't necessarily like the matchup, but McLaurin's a talent. We'll see what happens there. And he's got Drake London at Tennessee, 6,700. I'm not a big anybody from Atlanta guy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I believe old Mikey went Drake London last week. Maybe it was a blitz scenario. And I think, was it last week or the week? London had a good game recently.
I think it was in London.
There you go.
Oddly enough.
I'm trying. Are they?
While you look that up, I'll continue his lineup. He's got Kittle at home versus Cincinnati, 6,100. Flex, he's got Puka Nacua at Dallas, 8,000, and then defense special teams, he's got Seattle at home versus Cleveland, 4,300, which I think is actually halfway decent play.
I agree. PJ Walker starting at quarterback too for Cleveland again. Real quick on Drake London, the joke's on us. The guy's been double-digit DraftKings points 4 weeks in a row and 5 out of 6.
Well, I still don't like anybody in Atlanta. I don't care.
He 6 for 54 last week, 9 for 125 the week before, and 6 for 78 the week before. At least they're starting to get him the ball.
Very nice. Still not going to convince me. You're going to have to get over 200 and like 4 touchdowns to convince me that Drake London is worthwhile starting.
The last 3 weeks for him too. So maybe Drake London has arrived. We'll see what
Mikey's got the jump on both of us, apparently, on that is concerned. So my full lineup, what I'm going with, I got QB, I got Jalen Hurts at Washington, 9,200. The guy's starting to come into his own. We're seeing Jalen Hurts. They get down at the 1 or 2 yard line. The entire team is pushing him into the end zone. He's going to get 1 or 2 simply just like that. Running back, I got Jonathan Taylor at home versus New Orleans, 7,100. We discussed him. I also got Kareem Hunt at Seattle, 7,000. You mentioned PJ Walker, but Ford's out seemingly.
Nope, he's not.
I'm sorry.
Ford has been upgraded to questionable, and it looks like he actually might play.
Regardless, seemingly, Kareem Hunt was getting touches before anyways, so I still think this. So now, even with him questionable, I think that puts Kareem Hunt in the driver's seat, which puts him, as the number one. We'll see if he gets maybe.
I like them both. Honestly, if they both play. That's almost getting into a situation. You're not going to do it on a DFS lineup, but that's almost getting into a situation where in a league on like a bad bye week and injuries, you could actually start both those guys if you had both of them and get double digits from both of them now, which, it's unique to be able to expect that from 2 running backs on the same team. But I feel like one team a year figures that out somehow. And it's feeling like Cleveland right now.
Well, which I have both of them on my team in CTNFL, so I guess I'll see. I'll take a look at my lineup tomorrow. So, wide receiver wise, went over Jamar Chase at San Francisco, 8,500. This one I like. I got Garrett Wilson at the Giants, 7,200. I say at the Giants. It's in New Jersey. To me, this is going to be a bigger Jets crowd. The Jets fans are always louder. You got that fireman guy. JETS, they're always going to be louder than the Giants. So I don't remember the last time the Jets.
They're a better team, and they got momentum right now. I mean,
they do.
They just beat Philadelphia, and who the hell they beat last week? They just beat Philadelphia was last week. Denver the week before, so they've won 2. And the week before, really, I mean, Zach Wilson's kind of taking a bum rap here. Aaron Rodgers goes out for the fucking season. He swallows his Achilles 4 plays into the season. Wilson brings them back in the second half to beat Buffalo, who at week 1, Buffalo is a top 4 team in the NFL, everybody thinks. So Zach Wilson brings them back to triumphantly beat Buffalo week 1. He then goes for 0.9 points against Dallas in week 2. Okay. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's Breece Hall, not Zach Wilson. He then got killed against Dallas. We understand that. But he has been, I mean, they've won 2 in a row. They almost beat the Patriots. They almost beat the Chiefs. And I agree with you. I wish I'm a Giants fan, and I'd prefer to be a Jets fan tomorrow, assuming the way that game is going to go. So it just feels like Zach Wilson, like it was fun to, verbally rape him for a few weeks, but he's kind of playing his way out of it.
Hey, Garrett Wilson's the obvious number 1 there at 7,200. I think that's a halfway decent play. And since you brought it up, I think that the reason the Jets are in the position that they are is because of their defense, who I'm taking against the Giants at 4,400, by the way. Now I'll get back to wide receiver. This might be a risky play. I got Rashee Rice at Denver, 6,000. We don't know how much passing is going to happen in that game, but I have to think Mahomes is going to get some yards, and Rice has actually done halfway decent. And then I didn't mark him down as a bargain play just because of the snow, but he might be a halfway decent bargain going into that. Flex, Darrell Henderson at Dallas, 5,900. Tight end, you already brought him up. Trey McBride at home versus Baltimore, 4,700 in FanDuel. That's another bargain right there. So to fit some other guys in. So who you got, Joe?
All righty. So we talked about Lamar Jackson. He's 8,100 at Arizona. You had Jalen Hurts going, and I was looking at Hurts. He's been 20-plus DraftKings points every week since week 1. Lamar has been 4 out of 6. So I feel like we're gravitating towards the more consistent quarterbacks to not take the chance of the bad QB game. I had Fields in my lineup a couple of weeks in a row, DFS-wise. It worked one week, didn't work the next week, so playing a little safer. We talked about McCaffrey paying up for him, 9,200. Other running back we haven't talked about, and we just touched on the game, Breece Hall for the Jets. And obviously, people who had him last year have been waiting for him to do this year. And he had a good week 1, but then 3 bad weeks. But now he went for 31 DraftKings points against Denver, went for 20 last week against Philly. He's gotten in the end zone as a runner 2 weeks in a row, which is a great sign. It's a very juicy matchup against the Giants. So I like Breece Hall at 5,900 for another big week for the Jets. Wideouts, I've talked about all 3 of mine already. A.J. Brown, 8,000, Philly at Washington. Brown's been a top 5 guy this year. Going value with the other 2, with Jawan Jennings in San Francisco, 3,800. Taking advantage of the Deebo Samuel injury, taking advantage of the Justin Jefferson injury, and going Brandon Powell, Minnesota, only 3,200 at Green Bay after going 4 for 64 last week. We talked about McBride at tight end with Ertz out. My flex, really loving this now with the weather. Isaiah Pacheco, we talked about him. He's getting in the end zone for KC most weeks now. And then I've got the Steeler defense, 2,900 home against Jacksonville. I'm not sure how the Steelers are 4-2. I'm not really sure how they're scoring points. I mean, they just got Deontay Johnson back this week too. They had been without him also. But they're playing Mike Tomlin football, which is close, low-scoring games, and they're winning them. So home against Jacksonville, who looks great in London, per our boy Mikey, but I think he's really on to something. They haven't looked that great outside of London. So, the Pittsburgh just laid it on the Rams. So I think that they could make Jacksonville struggle a little bit tomorrow.
All right, I don't mind that. And actually, since you brought up Pacheco, this is interesting. And since we're talking about DFS, on FanDuel running back wise, you got Pacheco at 7,400, Breece Hall 7,200, Jonathan Taylor 7,100. So
that's really interesting.
To me, any of those are great options if you can kind of work those in from a DFS standpoint and work some other guys bargain wise. I think those are right in the wheelhouse right there between those 3 guys who are running back. So
yep.
But in any case, we will be back tomorrow morning. Give us, 12 and a half, 13 and a half hours, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be back for the Blitz. Mike will be back joining us tomorrow. So we look forward to that. And so until next week, Joe and I and Mike, we got you covered.